Conversation with Doc. It's time for Cleared to Play. Take you inside the tent, get you updated on the latest injuries in the Bay. Proud to partner with UCSF Health on this segment and bring in Associate Professor of Orthopedic Surgery, Dr. Nirav Pandya. Doc, how you doing? Who plays sports tonight?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, tonight's, I think we'll just say that we're going to talk about sports tonight with the Trey Lance, Jimmy G stuff.
Okay, perfect. So let's start with Jimmy G, actually, Doc, and let me ask you this. Are we being silly with the idea that if Jimmy Garoppolo has to play at some point in September, no training camp, no defenses, shoulder surgery in the offseason, is it just turnkey? Does he immediately come back and look like the Jimmy we've known?
I think, from a physical standpoint, in terms of like his shoulder and the structural healing, absolutely. He's at the point now where everything structurally should be healed. Now, the little nuances, is timing a little bit off? Is he potentially going to have to respond to his shoulder getting kind of thrown into the ground? Those little things may come with time. But I think overall, if Jimmy had to come in week 1, week 2, I don't think we'll see that big of a fall off. You may see a little issues in terms of passing and timing and maybe long balls, but I don't think with this kind of injury you would necessarily see anything major if you were to go out and play, and you should hopefully see the Jimmy G we've seen last year and the years before.
So it sounds like the 49ers are going to be without free safety Jimmy Ward. They initially said maybe through week 1. Now they're going to put him on IR. That means a minimum of 4 weeks he'll be out. Is that indicative of some kind of setback, or is that just kind of the proper way to deal with a significant hamstring injury?
Yeah, I think, a lot of it has to do with it. At what point do they get an MRI? For most hamstring injuries, you usually just say, look, you pulled your hamstring, there's a little bit of a strain, but if it's not necessarily responding, or you're like, look, this is an athlete who's really important, let's go ahead and get an MRI. And then the MRI actually shows that this is, I think what was reported a grade 3 injury, which means that it's a full tear. So typically for your garden variety hamstrings, they're usually kind of grade 2s, grade 1s. You're talking a couple weeks, that kind of fits that week 1 timeline. But if you have a full tear, that is where you start getting into the 8-9 week from the time of injury timeline. So given the fact that they said it was a significant tear and probably felt that they needed an MRI, it does make sense that he would be coming back potentially week 5, week 6. So it's not concerning in the sense that he's going to need surgery, but I think that extra time does fit with the fact that they said it was a significant hamstring strain, particularly in a team that's very familiar with their athletes getting these kind of injuries.
Doc, we do this a lot with NBA big men. We're like, lower body injuries, like we're doing it with James Wiseman right now. What about offensive linemen? These are not small human beings. Mike McGlinchey with the knee soreness. He had the quad last year, saw some practice video. He just returned, and it was like, didn't look like he was moving perfectly. What's the concern level there?
I think in general, the concern level would be a little bit higher. I think if you look at NFL players who've torn their quad tendon, and it's important to understand this is an injury you usually see in like 40 and 50-year-olds. So when that tendon is torn, it's a very large surgery that has to get done. And then basically you're dealing with this tendon that basically powers your knee. There's soreness basically coming from where you had the surgery done. And then that tendon is a little bit weaker, so then you're basically then going to get knee soreness and inflammation, which is what it sounds like McGlinchey's dealing with. I think the important thing for fans to understand that the fact that he's even back on the field is pretty remarkable. If you look at NFL players who've had this type of surgery, only 50% of them actually even make it back on the field. And you can see why. It's just a hard thing to basically deal with when this big muscle and tendon is torn. So I think this season, particularly in the first several weeks, there may be times when McGlinchey's knee is sore, or he may not be moving as well. I think that's just the natural course of dealing with this kind of injury. Clearly his tendon is healed enough that he's able to go back and play on an NFL field. But it's something this next year we may see off and on, and people shouldn't necessarily get worried if, okay, McGlinchey's going to rest for this week and then he's back next week, because it's just such a large surgery. And he's a big player, so you're going to put a lot more stress on that area.
Deebo Samuel coming off that big extension. He hasn't been practicing in the lead up to week 1 because of a bruise behind his knee. Is what I was reading. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so it can be, when you get these bruises behind the knee, it can be one of two things. The one that would be more concerning would be if the bone in the back of the knee is bruised, and that's when you're thinking about a bone bruise, where that could be, that's more troublesome. You're thinking 3 to 4 weeks, this is going to be a pain generator, or is it simply that you got, the muscles in the back of the knee basically got bruised? And there are a lot of different muscles back there. You've got your hamstrings, you've got your calf muscles that kind of run in the back of the knee. If that's generally the area that's sore, then I wouldn't be super concerned about it. So I think they're more describing this general area, just it has a lot of soreness and inflammation. And barring us seeing any kind of play that comes up where he got a big impact, This probably is just more bruising kind of in the calf and the hamstrings and the back of the knee, and this shouldn't be an issue. But I think, once again, whenever we start Deebo kind of getting these soft tissue injuries, it does make you a little bit worried, if this is already happening when the season starts. But hopefully it's just kind of one of those one-offs, and he'll be nice and healthy as the season goes on.
Real quick, Doc, I don't want you to diagnose, but second opinion was as bad as the first. Brandon Belt is apparently making a surgery decision probably sometime today. I don't know. This sort of feels like we might have seen the last of Brandon Belt.
Yeah, I think it is concerning, and I think it was even Kapler said, in I think in an interview, was talking about this is the same quote-unquote cartilage issue he's been dealing with. And, when it's ligaments, and kind of isolated meniscus tears, we have really good, ideas in terms of how to fix it. But when you have a cartilage issue and it's very diffuse, and someone who's had multiple issues with their knee, you do worry about, is this really kind of the end of this player's career? Because it's so hard to deal with cartilage issues and get them to heal really quickly. And when you're 34, 35, and you're dealing with kind of just a knee that's beaten up, there's not too much to do that gets you back in a quick enough period of time. So hopefully they can get something done, and you get surgery done, and potentially can be back next year. But in general, for an athlete of his age, it doesn't bode well with this kind of injury.
Interesting stuff. Hey, Doc, thank you as always.
Absolutely, no problem. Thanks a lot, guys.